Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you're able to hear me just fine, but let me know if you're not. But we are going to get this session 3 of day 3 of the Southwest Adaptation Forum started with a Mentimeter. So Alex, if you could get that set up. And the title of today's session 3 is Opportunities for Transforming the Use of Fire for Climate Adaptation. So you want to go to menti.com and enter the code 97171674. And the question I'd like to pose to the audience is, how are you transforming the use of fire for climate adaptation? All right, we're getting some responses in. Increased use of good fire. Somebody's at the learning stage, but they plan on being an advocate for policies that promote burning in the right way. So thank you to whoever that is. Advocating again, thank you for being an ally, committing to be an ally, and advocating for the things that are important to us as Indigenous people. Learning to listen better. Yes, I think that's on all of our to-do lists. Supporting tribal reps to take the lead. And thank you to those, just acknowledging, the support, being part of a strong support system, the advocacy, the allyship, and the commitment and willingness to do this as we're all in this together. Knowledge sharing and consistent education. If people are just tuning in, we're on menti.com. Menti.com, and you will enter the code 97171674 and answering the question of, how are you transforming the use of fire for climate adaptation? All right. Responses are coming in faster, so I think everybody's coming back from lunch. Simply encouraging people to include fire into conversations and planning processes. Yes. Being open-minded and flexible with my view of fire. Yes. Relationship with fire. It's all about relationship. Being open-minded, integrating fire management. That one went off the screen too fast for me. So thank you everybody for providing your feedback. And I look forward to reading more of these after we've concluded. So we'll go over to the panel. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us today and coming to session 3, day 3 of the Southwest Adaptation Forum, opportunities for transforming the use of fire for climate adaptation. My name is Althea Walker. I am Nez Perce Hopi in Gila River, and I'm pretty sure I failed to mention this when I did the opening on day 2, but I'm the Tribal Climate Science Liaison for the American Indian Higher Education Consortium at the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. And it's great to be here. Great to be a part of AHEC and with the Southwest CASC and building relationship with the Climate Science Alliance and the great team there. Everybody who is with me on this panel and the opportunities in my work that I get to know them and work with them. And I just wanted to remind everybody to follow along in your workbook. If we could get that link again in the chat box, please. If you want to post, or if you have any questions or would like to start a discussion on a specific topic, you can do that in the posting board. I will refer to the posting board at the end of the panel to seek any questions out. Or if you want to just put it in the chat box, whatever is easiest for you, but I will address the questions at the end of the panel if time permits. So we won't delay this any further, and we'll go straight into the panelists' introductions. And each of the panelists will have an opportunity to introduce themselves, and we will start with Chris Marks.
Hey, thanks. Thanks. Hope you can hear me well. First of all, I want to give a big thanks to Nicolette and your session. I know Melvin and I know Jerry well, and it's always fun to hear from those folks and learn about their programs. We at Grand Canyon watch those programs. We learn from those programs, and we enjoy supporting those programs. And we count on their program to support us. So it was great to hear from them and learn from them. So thanks for that session. It was really good. My name is Chris Marks. I'm the Deputy Fire Management Officer at Grand Canyon National Park. My responsibilities at Grand Canyon include fire ecology, our fire effects program. I'm the lead fire contact for our Section 7 and 106 consultations. And then on top of that, I still get to do fire. So I still assist with all our wildfires at Grand Canyon. I still help plan and implement many of our prescribed fires that we do at the Grand Canyon. And then I enjoy going to assist other agencies and other managers on large fires across the West. But I was really going to introduce the program more than me. So I'm going to share the screen. I think the program is far more interesting than I am. So hopefully you can see there should be a picture from the South Rim showing the Roosevelt fire over on the North Rim. So for me, I've been at Grand Canyon now since 2002, and I do truly enjoy the work that I do there, but there are some challenges that come with managing fire in our national parks. One is for us is that I get 6 million annual visitors that come to the canyon every year. So not only do I have some residents that live there, but I get visitors on a regular basis. On a busy weekend, we can see 40,000 plus people a day come. And you know, I made a joke at one time that they come to see our fire management program, not that Grand Canyon. But I'm pretty sure they're there to see the canyon, and they've traveled the world to see that canyon. So my relationship with them and fire is a complex one, especially when it comes to smoke and visibility. But with those challenges, we also have quite a few opportunities. So in the parks, you have to enter through entrance stations. So the opportunity I have is I can meet and I can talk to and I can pass out literature about fire ecology, fire safety, and fire regimes to every person that enters the park. And that's an opportunity, I think, that only the national parks have. But I can reach every person that comes to the park. We can talk about fire in our ecosystems. We can talk about the smoke column that's occurring on the rim across from them. We can talk about fire prevention, and we can talk about fire safety. So I do have certainly some challenges when it comes to dealing with 6 million visitors, but I also get to reach out and meet all 6 million visitors and talk fire. So when we do have fires on the South Rim, or on the North Rim, it looks something like this. We'll have anywhere from 10 to 12,000 visitors on the rim on a Saturday or Sunday, another 10 to 12,000 traveling to or from the rim. And they will see this. This is the image that they get. They'll be at all the visitor viewpoints. And we have opportunities not only at the entrance station, but opportunities to talk to them at every viewpoint. And what's nice about this is that there's a 12-mile canyon in between the fire and them. So they feel like they're at a safe distance. They can talk about fire. They're not scared of that fire because it's across the canyon, but they get a fantastic view of what that fire looks like. And now we can talk ecology. We can talk specifics about that fire. We can talk who's staffing it, who's helping it, all of that kind of stuff. So having all those visitors is quite an advantage. And here's one of my favorite visitors we had. And this is the Neowise Comet that came and did some nighttime aerial observation on the Thumb Fire last year. This is a fire that occurred on the South Rim of the Grand Canyon that also burned on Havasupai lands. We managed it together, it was a suppression fire, but we did get to see the Neowise Comet fly over and take a look at our fire, which was pretty exciting to see. I didn't know we got such visitors, but they were quick to come and quick to go, but exciting. A little bit about our program. So the picture in the upper left is a fire scar study. We've been well studied on the North Rim of Grand Canyon about fire history and fire regimes. This is one of those studies. And this is one of the samples that came from the study that shows on the figure below. So we had some researchers from Northern Arizona University do a fire history study. And if you look at that table down below, there's 132 samples that were taken. They look just like the one in the upper left-hand corner. And what they were doing was going back and counting fire scars on some of our old growth trees on the north rim of Grand Canyon. So the figure shows all of those 132 trees, that's the horizontal lines. What's striking are all the dark vertical lines that bisect many of those trees or those horizontal lines. So every one of those dark black ticks is a fire scar. So what that really shows, not that we have, not the dates aren't quite so important. What's important that prior to 1879, Grand Canyon was a fire landscape. It had fires occurring every year, all year, from back in the 1650s all the way to 1879. Some of that was lightning fire, and we think some of that was traditional burning. But it was a fire landscape at Grand Canyon. At 1879, we had quite a large fire, and you can see that last dark line bisects almost every tree on the north rim that was studied. And then from 1879 to today, we almost have zero fire. So that is the Western Movement West. That's the discovery of Grand Canyon National Park as a park, and it's our modern fire suppression program. So this is what happened come 2000, we start to develop a fire program, and we have a program now that hasn't seen fire, that saw fire frequently every 3 to 12 years, and now hasn't seen any fire essentially since 1879. So we have a totally different landscape than what we had prior. But since 2000, we've been quite active in burning, and this is what it looks like in terms of fire history. We have two distinct programs. We have a South Rim Fire Program and a North Rim Program. The South Rim Program is essentially is centered on visitor safety, because 85 or 90% of the visitors come to the South Rim. That's where all the buildings are, the hotels, and all the other visitor services. So the South Rim is where we do most of our prescribed burning, and those objectives include mostly visitor and resource safety. The North Rim is a whole different story. That is proposed wilderness, and for National Park Service policy, proposed wilderness is treated as designated wilderness. So this program is more about wildfire than it is prescribed fire. And what I want to show you on this map is this is regardless of how things were burned, whether prescribed fire or wildfires, this is the number of entries that have occurred since 2000 on that rim. So what I want to point out is there's a place on the North Rim just to the right of the North Rim developed area symbol. And what it shows is all sorts of different colors. The yellow color means it's burned 3 times. The salmon color means it's burned 4 times. And the red color means it's burned 5 times. So what we're excited about is that we're starting to create quite a complex mosaic of fire history across parts of the North Rim. And you can see that on several of the peninsulas that jet out into the canyon. So what we feel that is the more complex that fire mosaic is, the more resilient that landscape will be to any future disturbances, including climate change. So we're excited to see that we're getting 2 and 3 and 4 entries across much of this North Rim. We still have a lot of work to do. If you look at the dark gray, that means it's only burned once. And if it's got green where there's no color, then that means it hasn't burned at all yet. So we still have a lot of work to do, but we're starting to build these complex puzzles on the peninsulas that we hope are going to be far more resilient to future fires and to whatever other change comes to it. Our prescribed fire program is more of a landscape scale prescribed fire program than it is a small scale program. So this is one of our prescribed fires. We often do all of our ignition through aerial ignition. And the reason for that is for smoke management. And that's to get the smoke up in the air and away from the canyon so that we don't impact the view shed for the 40,000 or so visitors that are currently on the South Rim looking into the canyon. So a little bit about visitors. So our visitors come for a few hours or they come for a few days. So one of the tasks I have is to make sure that we still manage fire across our landscape, but I don't impact the visitor experience, or I minimize the amount of impact that I do in visitor experience. So it's quite a challenge. What I'm hoping that those visitors do is that they come to Grand Canyon not realizing that we even have a fire program, that they walk amongst our woods within our ponderosa pines, and they enjoy the open stands. They enjoy that they can see hundreds of yards through those open stands, that they sit and have picnics in the grass and the forbs. And they do that, never realizing that not only is there an active fire program, but in the 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s, there was a very active fire program across that landscape. So I like to be in the background. Our program likes to be in the background. We like to think that the visitors come, they live in they come and visit a fire landscape, even though they never realized they entered into a fire landscape. But we do have some permanent residents, and I would say our permanent residents include wildlife, cultural and traditional landscapes, old growth forests, all the other vegetation, including grasses and forbs, certainly the canyon and the river, and then of course the wind, the sun, the rain, and fire. Those are what I would call our permanent residents here at the Grand Canyon landscape. So my task at Grand Canyon is to find a balance. I need to manage this landscape to enhance and maintain those permanent residents. I also need to make sure that I enhance the visitor experience, the temporary visitors, without them knowing that maybe there was a fire program on this landscape. My challenge to meet that task is in the face of a changing climate. How do I do that? How do I manage a natural process in a natural landscape with 120 years of fire suppression, and do that under the microscope of 6 million worldwide visitors? So we've been fairly successful at that. Much of our prescribed fire program is built to create a wildfire program or to promote a wildfire program. So this is a wildfire called the Obi fire. This is from the South Rim looking over to the North Rim. It was about a 12,000 acre fire, and we were successful at managing that fire with just 22 people. Our cost per acre is quite low because of that. And that's all because of past prescribed fire programs and some of our past fires that have created that puzzle piece mosaic that I talked about earlier. So we feel like we've been quite successful. We have a lot of work to do still, but we're at this time meeting that challenge, now throwing in that climate change a challenge on top of everything else that we have is proving to be a little bit difficult. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to chat with you. And it's been a pleasure so far to learn from you all about fire, cultural landscapes, and this impending changing climate. And with that, I will leave it, and I'm happy to be part of the discussion here. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So we'll go over to Nikki with your introduction.
There we go. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to introduce myself one more time, and then just in case some of you weren't here, it's the respectful thing to do. Nikki Cooley and Shia Kenya on in the slow look at the net Bashichin. This is how I introduce myself in the Navajo way. I'm of the Towering House clan, born for the Reed People clan, and I am one of the co-managers of ITEP's Tribes and Climate Change program, along with Karen Cazzetto. And I'm really happy to be here. So I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, Nikki. We'll go over to Rachel.
Okay, that's Rachel Novak. So this gives you the net initially, but I got about it. Can you any dash it? Like Nikki, I am Danae also, and introduced myself where I was taught to when I speak in public. And I am the climate change coordinator and the climate science coordinator for the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program. And I am speaking to you today from Albuquerque, New Mexico. The homelands of several pueblos, including the Sandia Pueblo, Isleta, and I believe the Laguna Pueblos as well. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And we'll go over to Lindsey.
She got the down and out there, Ella cost got letting out Tontina, or Lindsey Quam let Shina killer was got Tontina, Lakilla, no Yashu, and Niana Diana, Wakilla, no Dikwana, Hongot, Ian Satuna, Ella. Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Lindsey Quam from Zuni Pueblo. and which is in New Mexico. And I am actually currently residing in Santa Clara Pueblo, up in the northern portion of the state. I'm married with Santa Clara, into Santa Clara, and I work for the New Mexico Forestry Division as the Deputy Director of Forests. So I work with our 6 district offices throughout the state to implement different forest and watershed health management issues, and also how we can mitigate climate impacts to those forests in New Mexico. And then I am also the tribal liaison for the Forestry Division, and I'll get a little more into what that means in my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey, and thank you to all the panelists for sharing your time and knowledge and experience with us today. So I'm going to ask each panelist a question in respect to their work and the transformation of fire and the use of fire for climate adaptation. So I'm going to go back over to Chris, and thank you for sharing your work in the Grand Canyon. But in addition to that, if you have any insight on how the other national parks are transforming the use of fire for climate adaptation, that'd certainly be great if you can share that with us today.
Yeah, certainly. I was going to just give a little bit of what we've done, what we're doing, and the challenges we're facing moving forward to be able to transfer the use of fire and adapt to this climate. So like I showed you, we've had quite a bit of fire on some of those landscapes, and we've worked hard on building those mosaic landscapes. And like I said, we think that the crazier the mosaic, or the more complex that mosaic, the more resilient that will be to any sort of, be more resilient and more adaptable to whatever climate change comes in. So we're going to continue to do that. Another thing that we started doing was we adapted from the Southwest Fire Climb program, that we started adding strategies and approaches to each one of our individual burn plans. So next to our project objectives, we're identifying climate approaches, and then we're also trying to define what this project does in terms of a climate adaptation plan. So we're either identifying it as a project that involves resistance, resilience, or transition towards climate change. And so it wasn't so that the project was developed to do just that, but it was to get everybody from the first-year firefighter to our superintendents talking about climate and fire on a project level or on a project scope. So we want to talk about climate and fire and how and what we're doing and how we're managing that and how we're going to integrate both of those on every project. So our burn plans are starting to be developed, and they're starting to talk more about climate than they ever have. So we're going to continue with that project as well. And then we started to develop some different prescribed fire projects that we've not done in the past. Many past projects have been, if I simplify it, it really was you identify a box, you prep a box, you burn a box, you hold the box, and then you've called the box treated. That's all typically done. All the burning is typically done in one afternoon. And we felt like the effects of those types of burn didn't vary that much, that all of it burned under the same conditions under the same day. So we started trying to burn outside of the box. And so instead of having very defined containment lines within our prescribed fire projects, we went ahead and defined really big prescribed fire program boxes. And within those boxes, we applied fire on the ground and we let it move freely across the land, just like we would a wildfire. And what we thought was happening was, not only are we creating a fire history mosaic, but within each one of those fires, we're allowing it to burn on the heat of the day. It's burning through the middle of the night. It's burning with windy conditions and wet conditions. It's burning under clouds and burning under full sun. And so not only are we achieving a mosaic of fire within the landscape, we're achieving this mosaic of fire effects within each project. And we think by doing that, we're just further complicating that landscape to, like I said, to make it just that much more complex in terms of mosaics across the landscape. So those have been a big success. There's a different type of risk involved with that. We don't put firefighters on the ground when we're burning. We don't hold anything when we're burning. We're counting on different aspects, counting on fall weather. We're counting on changes in vegetation and shading and changes in fuel moisture to be able to stop those fires. So the risk is transferred from firefighters who are out on the lines typically to those fire managers that are actually in charge of burning those fires. and the superintendent. But so far, it's been fairly successful. So the other thing that I want to discuss is just where are we going? And so I think climate to us is still something that we don't quite understand. We see all the models. There's hundreds of models out there. There are hundreds of groups talking about climate. There are papers being published on a daily basis about climate change. I think it's a little big. And so for us, that's daunting when it comes to managing fire. So our program is just starting to learn about, and this fits for many of the National Park Service programs, is that we have to start identifying new strategies and how we're going to address climate, not just in a burn plan next to objectives, but how we're truly going to address it. And that has to be that has to be a project with not just the fire program and not just the National Park Service, but that comes with tribes, it comes with climate scientists, it comes with the public, it comes with almost everybody being able to talk about where we want to take this Grand Canyon or these Park Service programs as we move into this uncertain future. So this collaborative approach is going to be fairly significant. We understand that. I look forward to doing that, but what we're trying to do right now is continue with what we've been doing, continue to get fire back on the landscape as much as possible. Continue to understand that I'm going to have 6 million visitors visit Grand Canyon. I think that number is going to roll to 7 million in a couple of years. I expect intended to be close to 8 million visitors. And so we need to learn, how do we manage that? How do we manage under a changing climate? And how do I manage under increasing populations coming to the park? That can't be done just by me. That has to be done as a group. And that group is going to be quite big. So that's what we're going to be doing. So really, for me, until today, I just learned something new that, we have really only talked about ecological resilience when it comes to climate change. So I was excited to see some of the comments. Somebody wrote cultural resilience, and that's something I haven't talked about, and we haven't as a program looked into. So that would be something that we would need to discuss. Not only is our fire management strategy ecologically based, but it's culturally based too. And we need to figure out where that fits, how that fits, and how that gets impacted from this changing climate as well. So we have a lot of work to move forward with. I think we've moved forward a couple steps, but we really need to start talking and having big talks about where we're headed, what we think the place will look like, and where we think we can resist climate change, where we think we'll be resilient, and where we think we'll transform. So, and I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Chris, and sharing your work. It's certainly always interesting to learn, what the national parks are doing, in the Southwest and across the nation. And somebody mentioned earlier in a previous panel about, incorporating or including Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous perspective, cultural burning in burn plans. So hopefully that's something in the future that the national parks do, and include that Indigenous perspective, knowledge and science. So thank you, Chris. We are going to go over to Lindsey in New Mexico. So Lindsey, my question for you, in your work in New Mexico, what opportunities have presented themselves to transform the use of fire for climate adaptation, especially with the Pueblos and any other tribes near the state?
Just thank you for that question, Althea. Like any agency, whether it be federal or state, we're held by state laws and statutes. We have to wear our state hat anytime we're working with tribes or engaging with tribes. But I think for us, we try and approach it from we can't do that, which is what I think a lot of frustration comes from with tribes, is because that's all they ever hear is, well, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. So we try and approach it from, this is what we can do, or these are the ways in which we can do it. And for the forestry division, our response area is non-tribal, non-federal, non-municipal lands, which is state and private lands. Is where our response area is. It's our area of support, and that's who we primarily work with. However, we have several different mechanisms we've engaged in to start working with tribes, collaborating with tribes, and including them in the mix with what we're doing. A lot of that stems from New Mexico's State Tribal Collaboration Act, which is an act that was passed in 2006 by the state legislature, which mandated all state agencies to engage with tribes. And then that's where kind of the position I also support the tribal liaisons came from. It mandates that each state agency has a tribal liaison to effectively engage and communicate with tribes. So through that Collaboration Act, we've allowed opportunities for tribes to engage in a fire role through shared stewardship that we have with the U.S. Forest Service. We specifically mentioned tribes in that agreement. They had tribal input. We spoke to tribes about it and basically got, the various governors, presidents, chair people's blessing to include them in on that stewardship agreement. Further, we just this year passed the Prescribed Burn Act, which is a brand new act that allows us to conduct prescribed burning on state and private lands. Now that necessarily doesn't benefit tribes per se, but how it can benefit tribes is we can work through the prescribed fire council that's set up to help assist us with implementation of this act, to provide them training, to provide them avenues to be able to engage in prescribed burning activities so they can get qualifications, sign off on task books, help on burns, get to learn how to do burn planning. And it just provides another tool for us to allow them to be able to engage, because a lot of the lands that abut tribal lands here in New Mexico are either surrounded by federal lands or private lands. And in order for us to do full-scale landscape, cross-boundary management, we need to have tribes a part of the piece of that puzzle. We need them there at the table, engaged, to allow us to be able to do that full landscape scale type restoration. Another endeavor that we're engaging in is creating a private landowner fire management plan, which is something we haven't done. And since our authority for fire management requires that we put all fires out, period, full suppression, we're trying to work through ways in which we can conduct modified suppression for naturally ignited fires and allow them to burn through certain areas for firefighter safety. But in order for us to be able to do that, a private landowner needs a fire management plan. So we're engaged in primarily the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service for kind of the PODS concept that's out there, the potential operational delineation. That's how we're setting up private landowners to create fire management plans, and how that can benefit tribes is it's another tool that they can engage in, that they can use and present to the Bureau of Indian Affairs to try and help with their fire management planning and implementation of naturally ignited fires and even cultural burns. And then we also have a pot of money that we're implementing that state funding that concentrates on forest and watershed restoration. But within that auspice, we're also including prescribed burning. So there's a potential for tribes to be able to access that funding to engage in prescribed burn planning and implementation. And that can include cultural burning. We're not there yet. We haven't formally engaged with a tribe that's interested in doing that, but that's something that for myself, I'd like to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey. And we will go over to my sister, Nikki Cooley. So my question for you, Nikki, in your work with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, how are you and your colleagues at ITEP building tribal capacity to transform the use of fire for adaptation?
Thank you, Shada or Shadeja. I think you're younger than I am. So I called you my little sister. Thank you, Lindsey. That was really interesting to hear what you guys are doing over there, over the hill. So At ITEP, I do think I want to start out with ITEP. So for the Tribes and Climate Change Program, we work with tribes across the country on adaptation planning and now mitigation planning. And so our job is to really help them build capacity. And what I mean by that is to make sure that their employees are trained about climate change and what adaptation or mitigation is, and what funding opportunities are out there or partnerships, but also to support them in the process, so they're not writing their plan alone. It used to be that tribes would feel kind of stuck because they would be the water resource director, the climate change coordinator, and the emergency contact or services contact. So multiple duties can be overwhelming. So our job is to really support them and connect them. And I really like your question about how we're to transform the use of fire for adaptation. I think that the first thing is that we are really encouraging tribes to feel comfortable in using their culture, their language in their documentation. Documentation can be like management plans, climate change adaptation, mitigation plans, and to feel comfortable. And it's okay to say fires are relative. Fire is a living, breathing thing, just as my colleague and friend John Galvin from Jemez Pueblo in the previous session said, it's a living entity and we must respect it and treat it as such. And so that vocabulary is something that I've been focusing on recently, is to say, to manage, we say manage quite a bit. That's just something that comes out of our mouth naturally. But I've been using care for, to take care of, to kind of use that kind of language, because it's a living, breathing entity. So they can feel and hear us. And so I think tribes are getting more comfortable in using that type of language in their plans, because it is their plan. And they, thankfully to the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program funds that are allocated through grants, they're kind of having that moment where they're realizing that it's in their hands. They can write it how they want, and I encourage them not to really copy others, but to really make it their own document. And wildfire is one of those things, and that term in itself also instills a little bit of fear. When you think of wildfire, you think of something out of control or killing Bambi's mother. And, it's just that we have that, or Smokey the Bear, it's all of that. Has gone on in the past that really dictates how we feel today. And so I'm really encouraging them to do that, whether it's through Celso Villegas on the first day said, he uses climate cartoons to really communicate climate change impacts to the community members, or even on their websites, but also acknowledging fire as a part of, the group. I think someone from one of the Ute tribes up in Utah was saying that she had an idea of to leave a chair open and available for our non-human relatives, and it could be fire, it could be the elk, it could be the skunk. Any of them could have a seat at that table, but to leave it open for them. So I think in that way, it's unusual. It's not the way most Western entities, scientists, researchers, what have you, would do it that way, whether it's academic or nonprofits. That's how they do it. So changing that kind of mindset is really important. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. So I hope that was helpful. So I'll pass it back to you, Althea. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. And I'm going to put in the chat box a link to this resource was mentioned by Anne Marie Chischili on day one, but the University of Oregon's Tribal Climate Guide, in which all the tribal climate adaptation plans, just climate related documents are listed there. in which, you can find like the UROC, their focus on fire in their, on one of their adaptation plans, and then I believe the UROC as well. But you can see just, and ITEP plays a big part in this, and giving us as tribes the knowledge and capacity that we need to be able to put these plans together and to plan for climate change. So thank you to ITEP and to Nikki and Karen and the rest of the team at ITEP for everything that you do for tribes across the nation. So we are going to go over to Rachel. Rachel, the question that are you still here with us? Yes. Okay. The question I have for you is what resources are you making available to tribes, pueblos, and Alaska Natives to transform the use of fire for adaptation?
Yeah, thanks very much, Althea, and to Nikki and Lindsey and our colleague from the National Park Service, my other federal colleague. Or is it Grand Canyon Trust? I'm sorry. Sorry if I got that wrong. But yeah, I will go ahead and talk a little bit about the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program and our funding opportunities to help with certain efforts like these in the planning side. And I will go ahead and share my slides then. So hopefully, okay, does that look all right?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk today, Althea and all the organizers. I will talk a little bit about our program, and towards the end, I've got some examples of some of the relevant cultural burning and prescribed fire related activities that we have funded in the past as well. So just for some examples. But the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program is kind of young relative to the other programs at BIA. We started back in 2011, so we're just coming up on a decade old. And right now we are a modest sized program. So it's myself and my wonderful colleagues, Elisa Samoy and Corwin Carroll. And our purpose is to really help tribes mainstream climate change considerations into their existing management plans to help reduce risk to tribal and trust resources. So a lot of that really has to do with identifying climate resilient strategies, which could include cultural burning, prescribed burning to help improve outcomes for existing program operations. So sorry, a little bit of the bureaucratic speak, just because I've got my federal hat on right now. But the idea is that through incorporating climate into these existing planning plans and project designs, you can minimize impacts, reduce scale of emergencies, and damage and threats to human health, well-being, and our non-human relatives as well. So we have three focus areas: adaptation planning. We also have an area focused on relocation, manage, retreat, and protect in place, which isn't as relevant to today's discussion, and ocean and coastal management planning, which also isn't quite as relevant to this discussion. But we have an annual solicitation opportunity, and it's currently open right now. It closes on the 23rd of this month, so there's just a couple weeks left, and you can find that on our website. On our webpage, we have a link to it. There's also one on grants.gov as well, and we have an archive if you want to learn more about the details of it. It's on the ITEP website. ITEP helped us host an informational webinar back last month, so there's a more detailed webinar recording if you'd like to go back and listen to that. But generally, you can find you can find more about our solicitation in two places. So obviously on grants.gov, and then on our homepage, like I mentioned, and there's just a little screenshot of what that looks like. There's the solicitation, proposal cover page, FAQs, and some optional application forms that help streamline the process for some of the smaller awards. So these are the categories of funding that we have, and I highlighted the areas that might be of more interest to needs related to cultural burning practices, prescribed fire, and that's probably more the category in 2 and 3. So those are focused on adaptation planning and data development. It is focused more on the planning side of things. And the idea is that the implementation follows the planning. So once you get your plans down, that can go a long way to help you getting ready for implementation. And there's still so much work on the planning side. And so that's really where we focus right now. But we have this category 2. The maximum is 150,000 annually. You can apply year after year and receive it. But in terms of the limitations within the years, it's limited to 2 of the larger awards, not to exceed 1 award per category. The larger awards, we mean like 150,000. There's travel support too for adaptation planning. So I know Lindsey had mentioned several training opportunities. That's the sort of thing that these funds could easily support travel to if that's something that's needed. Or trainings perhaps that our colleagues over at the CASC also make available to tribes. So that's a little bit about the adaptation planning category that I think is most relevant to this audience. We also do have internships and youth engagement, and that might be something of interest too. And we're happy to revitalize these 2 categories of funding after being absent for the last few years. So those are both a max for 50,000, and category 8 is to support internships, and 9 is to support youth engagement. So more at the K through the 12 versus the internships. It's kind of more college students or very, very recent graduates. We know that can help with workforce development, helping with our next generation and their development, and overall capacity as well. So just a couple common questions that you might have. There aren't any prerequisites for this funding. There aren't any matching requirements. We do have some extra modest supplementary points if there are tribal contributions, and that can be like in the form of staff time. It can be in kind or monetary, either one. And then you might be wondering how competitive the process is. So in 2020, last year, we received 194 proposals and we were able to fund 157 of them. So it's almost 3/4 that we're able to fund. In terms of the amount of funding. In terms of the number of proposals, that's actually 81% of the request. And last year we did support 113 tribes and tribal organizations in their proposals. So that can be helpful. And so this is the slide I mentioned just to give an example of some of the fire-related tribal activities that we funded in the last few years. So there's the native village of Klutikla, and these are really focused on fire versus looking at fire through like a suite of other related, kind of more like a vulnerability, multi kind of hazards. We get proposals that do include that, but I really wanted to focus on the ones that we get, that we've received and funded. We've received more than this, but the ones that we've received and funded that really focus on fire. And so we had 2 last year that we funded, and including something that might look familiar with the 2021 Southwest Tribal Climate Change Summit. And then in 2019, the main one that we funded there was from the Pueblo of Santa Clara for their forestry department, for their burn area restoration, and some capacity building through training. And then in our 2017-18 cycle, we funded 3, and that was the Sault Ste. Marie Band of Chippewa Indians. And this reminds me of what Nikki had said about using our language in our plans. And so Ishkode, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is the word for fire. And so they're really focused on how to build ecological resilience through adaptive planning and management of fire in particularly boreal transition ecosystems. And then 2 others were the Shoshone Paiute tribe of Duck Valley, the fire adaptation planning and training program. And then the Navajo Nation that year also was awarded a grant to look at integrated watershed risk assessment, and they did that in collaboration with the University of Arizona, and used some of the technical support there through, I think, one of the faculty that works in the tree ring lab, to get a better sense of, looking to the past for better understanding of wildfire flooding and debris flow, and how that could impact their future management. So those are just a handful that I wanted to highlight. And I will mention, we don't get a lot of proposals focused on cultural burning, and we could. So there is, more capacity for it, just because in 2019 we only, there was one there. That's more representative of the fact that we didn't get a lot of proposals on fire. But like I said, it can be part of, framing it in the context of climate adaptation planning makes it, very acceptable to the realm of things that our adaptation planning funds are for. And then I just have a couple of helpful resources. We do have BIA POCs in each of the regions for our program, and they can be really helpful. They're usually the points of contact that you would go to once you have been awarded a grant. They can be very helpful. They're at each of the BIA regions. And then we also work very closely with the Tribal Climate Resilience Liaisons through the DOI CAS. So our partners like Althea and Stefan Tangen for the North Central, and 6 others. So here are their wonderful faces. They're really great. If you don't know your liaison yet, reach out to them. They're really wonderful resources for whatever you might be working on that's related to climate change. So I encourage you to reach out to them. And then I think the last kind of content slide I have is this one. And that's just if you need some expertise that you don't have in-house, like the Navajo Nation example I gave earlier that worked with University of Arizona, and you're applying for a grant through our program, you can include them in your, like a program partner in your budget. And we do have the ability to send funding to that organization and to the tribe separately, so the tribe doesn't have to worry about contracting with a university separately, because I know that can be another administrative headache. So we can kind of take that off the plate if that's something that tribes would be interested in through our grant program. So you can find more information out in that website. And I think a lot of these resources have been mentioned earlier, so I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for providing AHEC with the funding for my position to be at the Southwest CASC. We certainly appreciate all that you do for us and for Indian country. So we have about 4 minutes left, and we are the last session of the 2021 Virtual Southwest Adaptation Forum. So I think we need to leave everybody with some inspiration, with some hope, looking forward to all the work that needs to be done. So my question to the panelists, any last words you'd like to share in respect to climate resiliency or climate hope? And we'll just skip around.
I can go first. I think climate resilience, climate hope is very evident and has been evident in what Indigenous communities have and are doing. We're using our ancestors' knowledge, ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears, and we hold it true in our hearts and in our actions. As you have seen the past 3 days, we've started off and ended with a prayer, and John offered his prayer. So I think that right there provides a lot of hope for me, and I hope it does for you. And I would look to Indigenous communities really for climate resilience, because there's I've heard this, and Althea and I've talked about this, is that natural and cultural resources are not separate. They're two separate departments in many institutions and many tribes, but that's not how we think. and that's not how we should operate. They are one in the same, you know. One of my fathers, I have many, he said, you know, once I was asked, where are you from? And he said, I am from here, Mother Earth, because, you know, I'm the Towering House clan. My clan, I was literally created by Changing Woman when she took a piece of her flesh under her arm and then mixed it with the earth and then molded my clan and my people. And therefore, maybe that's why I'm the same color as the earth and whatnot. So it speaks true to what we have and have been doing. So I would ask for that respect. So thank you, and I'll pass it on to the next person. Yeah.
For myself here with New Mexico, you know, one thing that I'm trying to start to get engagement from tribes and to have a seat at the table, so to speak, is a tribal forum. So we can discuss these types of issues. We can discuss paths forward and ways in which we can maximize the resources and knowledge base and tools that tribes bring to the table to help one another, and not only to help one another, but to help us out as other agencies who sometimes have to stop at a border and can't cross the border because of different issues, different restrictions. So that's something we're trying to do, so we can engage in that type of work with tribes in order to maximize the benefit across the landscape for not only for what we do and the funding we get, but also for the tribes and all New Mexicans and pretty much the whole Southwest in general. So that's really what we're engaging in for climate adaptation and resilience, because again, they have the knowledge, they have the expertise. You know, we have certain tools that we've got to work with, but we can help transform those tools or mold those tools in such a way to incorporate what tribes have and incorporate the way in which they want it incorporated to benefit them. But it's just a willingness, you know. People, a woman that I look up to has always said that, you know, decisions and rules are made by the people that show up. And if people don't show up, then there's only a select few that make those decisions for everybody. Thank you.
I know we're running low on time, so I just thought I'll bring my inspiration, and probably all of our inspiration is our little ones and their great, 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 great grandchildren. So this is my Bikea, my Yeji. He's the most positive thing I can end on. He's cheering us on.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. We will go into closing remarks and a closing blessing. So thank you to my panelists.